The Universal Studios brand wasn't always found preceding abortions such as Sing or Trolls. No, back in the 1930s through the 1950s, Universal made monster movies. The Great Depression took its toll on movie theaters and production houses. Many had to shut their doors because ticket prices were down, theater attendance was down. But Universal managed to stay afloat almost solely because of the success of these creature feature films. Dracula, Universal's first monster movie hit, released in 1931. It made $700,000 in the box office, which was pretty much unthinkable for films after Black Thursday. Universal ruled the roost from the 1930s through the 50s, but around the mid-50s, audience interest had waned in the classic kind of creature feature film. The reception of the later crossover movies was lukewarm or negative. Universal began seeing waning success from films like Frankenstein Meets the Wolfman and from the all-together films like House of Dracula and House of Horrors. The crossovers didn't just end in universe either. Abbott and Costello, a popular comedy duo, were introduced into the universe with films like Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein, Abbott and Costello Meet the Mummy, you get the picture. These crossover films would ring the death knell for Universal. They had lost the flair and intrigue of the first few creature features. The shared universe and injection of comedy into what should have been more serious affairs had critics and audiences agreeing that Universal was beating a dead horse. Does that sound familiar to you? History doesn't repeat, but it sure does rhyme. A challenger to the Universal throne appeared on the scene in 1955. Hammer Film Productions had just released the Quatermass Experiment, giving the struggling production house a much-needed financial windfall. The alien-themed horror film paved the way for Hammer to pick up the slack left by Universal's waning popularity. The UK-based production house began making their own Dracula, Werewolf and Frankenstein films, which saw quite a bit of success. This is probably because the audiences wanted to see the characters they had grown to love in the 1930s through the 50s in a way that didn't destroy their characters. The gore and the early adoption of Technicolor technologies didn't hurt either. Werewolf by Night was inspired by this era of filmmaking, especially the early Universal classic monster films of the 1930s. The director, Michael Giacchino, wanted to marry the gore and intensity of Hammer films with the classic tones and themes of early Universal creature features. Giacchino knew his strengths. While Werewolf by Night is his directorial debut, he isn't new to big-budget filmmaking. He began his career composing music for big-budget films, TV shows, and video games. If you've watched blockbusters or played AAA video games during the early 2000s and 2010s, chances are you've already experienced Giacchino's music. So during the filming of Werewolf by Night, he used his expertise in music composition to his advantage. He would play pieces of music to his cast before they began filming a scene to note the tone, level of tension and the theme of the scene. Giacchino believed that music was a universal language, and this method would allow actors to deliver a more complete performance. Needless to say, Giacchino also composed the score for Werewolf by Night, and it is by far the best part of this film. The score is vast orchestral and is used incredibly well to underscore high-tension moments. The score, as well as a host of other elements in the film, are love letters to 1930s creature feature films. Werewolf by Night recreated a lot of defects seen in older films. The title and credits would shake, and white specks and scratches routinely appear on the screen. And of course, authentic looking film grain was created by scanning the digital onto 35mm film. Most of the special effects in Werewolf by Night are not computer generated. The heads of the monsters mounted on the wall, the animatronic Ulysses Bloodstone, and even the werewolf itself were all created using practical methods. The most interesting bit about the film, I think, comes from interviews with Giacchino. He seems to be very worried about the bean counters at Marvel Studios, interfering with his vision for the film. So worried, in fact, that they shot the film in colour and had a monitor on set that showed what the scenes would look like in black and white. Giacchino believed that the studio would veto the gore that he wanted to show. For this and other choices, he went forward simply because no one from the studio told him no. In the end, he believed that Marvel allowed him to have so much gore because the film wasn't sadistic. It was couched in a story that encouraged empathy for the characters. I do not believe this is true. I believe the bean counters at Marvel weren't hovering over the production of Werewolf by Night because it isn't a high-profile part of their roster. Giacchino got away with the things he did because they overlooked it. But his worries are in and of themselves interesting. They show that Marvel has a habit of interfering with films, and in this rare case, they didn't. These fears are not unfounded. Giacchino worked as a composer on a fair few Marvel films, the original Doctor Strange, all of Marvel's Spider-Man films, and most recently, Thor: Love and Thunder. He has even composed the score that accompanies the Marvel logo. So his worries about his vision being interfered with are born from experience. This is very telling about the state of Marvel Studios today. The look and sounds of Werewolf by Night are brilliant. Unfortunately, the writing just isn't. The Bloodstone family is a line of monster hunters armed with a legendary weapon, also called the Bloodstone. The Bloodstone weapon grants the wielder a longer life, both defense and offense against monsters. The plot begins with the death of the patriarch of the Bloodstone line, Ulysses Bloodstone. Normally, the Bloodstone weapon is passed down from parent to child, but Elsa Bloodstone, for whatever reason, has left the family. With this self-imposed exile, she has given up her right to own the Bloodstone weapon. So it's been decided that the Bloodstone will be given to the best monster hunter alive. To figure out who that is, the best hunters are gathered on the night of Ulysses Bloodstone's funeral to participate in a contest. The Bloodstone would be attached to the hide of a monster, and the hunters have to kill it and extract the Bloodstone. They aren't allowed to bring any weapons into the arena. Weapons would be placed there at strategic locations for them to find. Oh, and of course they're allowed to kill each other. So in essence, they're playing a battle royale video game, but for keeps. The hunters were given a medallion which acts as their entrance ticket to the battle royale. But one hunter doesn't have a medallion, Elsa Bloodstone herself. She's confronted by her stepmother, Verussa Bloodstone, who says she's disgraced the family line, betrayed Ulysses, yada yada yada. It would have been useful to know why Elsa left the family, giving us insight into why we shouldn't like Verussa, and giving us reasons why we should support one of our protagonists. Verussa desperately wants to kill Elsa, you know, your typical evil stepmother shit, but she doesn't want to do it herself, so she decides to throw Elsa to the wolves in the maze. Here we're introduced to our other main character, Jack Russell. We're also told that he has 100 confirmed monster kills. Keep that in mind, I'll come back to it later. With the Bloodstone now attached to the hide of the monster, the hunters are dropped into the maze. We find out that Jack Russell isn't like the other hunters. He has an ulterior motive for participating in this contest. He wants to rescue the beast in the arena, not slay it. The writers have written themselves into several holes at this point. They need the two protagonists, Jack and Elsa, to come to an uneasy truce and work together to achieve their ends. But this Colosseum is unforgiving, and every moment you spend inside it is tense. The protagonist must fear every other bloodthirsty monster hunter, if not the monster itself. So the writers need a little bubble, away from the noise and the bloodshed, for the two protagonists to negotiate this truce. So the writers have Jack and Elsa enter a mausoleum with an automatically locking door. Now they're stuck inside and none of the other hunters can enter. Them being stuck without a way out is essential, because this is how the writers can justify the protagonist's inaction in furthering the plot. The writers have bought the peace they wanted for the pair of protagonists to bond and decide to help each other. Elsa would help Jack free the monster, and in return Elsa would get the Bloodstone weapon. Now that that's done, the writers need a way for the pair to leave this bubble of peace and re-enter the dangerous arena and further the plot. And just like that, Elsa remembers some crazy dead aunt of hers that's been buried alongside a key because she believed she'd returned to life. There's another issue about this little bubble that the writers have built. Jack had found a tiny timed explosive before he's entered the mausoleum, which means there already was a means to exit this bubble without the need for the dead aunt ex machina. But the writers could not use this explosive because it is the monster's ticket out of the arena. Should they choose to use it here, they would exhaust it as an option and find themselves in a hole where the monster is unable to escape the arena. Hence the need for the key in the coffin. When you introduce your characters to a small location that they cannot leave with limited resources, your writing must be as tight as humanly possible. Your characters must also behave as realistically and logically as possible. Whatever resources you provide to your protagonist must be set up well. Just materializing the resource in your protagonist's hands simply will not fly. Even the existence of this bomb in the arena makes no sense. The organizers of this contest wouldn't want either the hunters or the monsters leaving the arena, so the inclusion of an explosive device that allows them to do just that makes zero sense. A shiny little science fiction bomb is also at odds with the 1930s theme of the show. It feels anachronistic, especially since the rest of the weapons we see are an axe, a hammer, a crossbow, and whatever that thing is. These are low-tech, while the bomb is awkwardly high-tech. Elsa Bloodstone brings Ted, the man-thing, to the crack in the wall, where Jack Russell struggles with a bomb that refuses to explode. After the wall is finally destroyed, Ted sprints through, and Elsa grabs the Bloodstone weapon off its back. Ted is now effectively removed from the plot until the end of the film. There's a few bits of poor writing surrounding Man-Thing. First, we're told that the Bloodstone weapon weakens monsters, and we have no visual indication of this weakening. Ted is able to burn people alive using his bare hands, which doesn't change from when the Bloodstone weapon is on him and when it isn't. Second, the writers have written themselves into another hole. Ted remaining in the plot isn't good for what the writers have planned for Jack and Elsa. He would act as a third wheel for scenes which should have the protagonists reconcile the hidden truth about Jack, that he is a werewolf. The writers wanted to trap Jack and Elsa in a cage, which would prove difficult if they included Ted, a creature capable of disintegrating things with his bare hands. There are two other issues here. They need Ted alive, possibly for future MCU appearances, and they need the spotlight to remain on the werewolf, not on the Man-Thing. And so Ted is ejected from the plot, never to return again until the end of the film. Jack tries to grab the Bloodstone, which violently throws him back. Almost on cue, Verussa Bloodstone, the remaining hunters, and a bunch of henchmen in shiny sci-fi armor show up, angry that Elsa helped a monster rescue another monster. Verussa throws Elsa and Jack in a cage, and they have a conversation about Jack hiding the fact that he's a werewolf. Here we're told that he locks himself up every full moon so he doesn't hurt anybody, and it's implied that he attacks people indiscriminately when he transforms. He also tells Elsa that the confirmed monster kills that he has under his belt were carried out by the werewolf, not him. This is inherently contradictory writing. If he attacks man and beast indiscriminately, then the monsters he killed were a matter of chance, not of intentionally applied skill like the other hunters. If he only transforms into the werewolf during a full moon night, and we're being generous, that would give him only around 10 hours every month. Then there's the added disadvantage of him locking himself up every full moon, which would mean he couldn't hunt anything, at least since he's put this measure in place. Finally, the confirmation of kills would require a process. The most logical thing I can think of is the hunter walking over to some sort of accountant with physical proof that he's killed a monster, after which he'd receive a payout and a notch in his ledger. I find it hard to believe that Jack would kill a monster in his werewolf form, then transform back, and then go find the mangled corpse of the monster he'd kill and bring it down with him to the accountant. This is made worse by the fact that he doesn't have any wherewithal while transformed. With this scene, they have essentially proven that Jack Russell shouldn't be anywhere near this battle royale. Elsa tells Jack that they don't have to wait for the full moon for him to transform. The bloodstone weapon can turn him into the werewolf at any point in time. This isn't at all consistent with the purpose of the bloodstone weapon. All we're told about it at this point is that it allows the wearer to live longer and it weakens and hurts monsters. Giving it the ability to transform Jack Russell doesn't make much sense because it actually increases his strength, and it turns out to be the stupidest thing Verussa could have ever done in this situation. Jack Russell's transformation is the single best scene in the movie. We don't directly see the change, we see Elsa Bloodstone's reaction to it. She's cowering in the corner of the cage, her face a visage of fear. The orchestral score builds to a crescendo, while flickering shadows of Jack's transformation are cast on the wall behind her. Simply marvelous. Jack makes quick work of the henchman but is unable to beat Verussa, armed with the bloodstone weapon. Elsa rescues him and true to his word, Jack jumps on Elsa. This results in a cliched but narratively solid bonding moment for the two characters. Elsa refuses to use the bloodstone weapon on Jack, and even in his werewolf form, he recognizes Elsa and doesn't kill her. After Jack leaves, Verussa makes it back to her feet, making this the final showdown between herself and the stepchild she despises. Ted bursts back onto the scene, turning Verussa into kebab. This again is poor writing. It is another Deus Ex Machina which brings the count up to 2 for a very short movie. Verussa and Elsa clearly have a history and a healthy hatred for each other. This final showdown would provide closure of that history and that chapter of Elsa's life. But instead, the writers have Ted kill Verussa and then exit stage left immediately. The reason for this decision is because they've written themselves into a corner. Yet again. Verussa is armed with a shotgun and Elsa is trapped in a corridor with no exit. She's essentially a fish in a barrel. There's no realistic way for Elsa to not die in this situation, and so they brought back Ted for a brief moment. The film ends with Elsa taking her place as the new matriarch of the Bloodstone family and wielder of the Bloodstone weapon, as the film fades to colour. Ted and Jack Russell enjoy a spot of coffee and make plans to eat sushi. Werewolf by Night could have been a neat little film had it not been plagued with these writing inconsistencies. It is clearly driven by an artistic vision and a love for early cinema and its music. Heather Quinn and Peter Cameron did a rather poor job with the screenplay and the story. They wrote themselves into holes they couldn't write themselves out of without severely damaging the integrity of the storytelling. Maybe if Michael Giacchino was allowed a say in the writing, it might have been better, who knows. Or maybe that's just wishful thinking on my part. The anachronism in the film ruins the tone somewhat, but I recognize why it's there. It's because Werewolf by Night has to take place in present day, so the characters can be integrated into a wider cinematic universe. It does spoil the theme and the ambiance of the film regardless. Despite these issues, I still think Werewolf by Night is a breath of fresh air for a stale cinematic universe that's been beating a dead horse.